are going to be talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and get the recording started, and we will get this meeting underway. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Dunn, for those of you that don't know me, and it is my honor to be the moderator for today's panel discussion on what makes a winning speech. As you know, I am a proud Toastmaster, and I've been a part of this incredible community since 2018. Currently, I'm serving as the Eastern Division Director for District 50, and I am committed to helping individuals develop both their public speaking skills and leadership skills in order to achieve their goals. I'm excited to be here today, and our panelists, I'm excited to be here today with our panelists so that they may share their experience and insights on what it takes to deliver a winning speech. With the help of our esteemed panelists, we hope to provide you with valuable tips and strategies that will take your contest speech skills to the next level. Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, distinguished Toastmaster, Kellie McMasters. Kellie has been a prominent figure in the Toastmaster community and has proven her merit time and again. She has been a Las Vegas Division and District finalist for the Humorous Speech Contest 4 times and has been a District 50 Table Topics and Humorous Speech finalist as well. Kellie's journey as a Toastmaster has been nothing short of remarkable. She has a wealth of experience when it comes to preparing for and delivering winning speeches. And her insights will undoubtedly be invaluable to all of us here today. Currently, Kellie serves as the Club Growth Director for District 50. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Kellie McMasters. I am delighted to introduce our next panelist, distinguished Toastmaster, Monica Dirden. Monica has been a Toastmaster for many years and is highly decorated public speaker. She has won the District 50 International Speech Contest twice and was the Toastmasters International semifinalist, 3rd place winner. But what sets Monica apart is her unwavering passion for public speaking. For her, public speaking is not just a hobby or profession, it's her life's work. She believes that anyone can develop the skills to become a great speaker, and she has dedicated her life to helping others do just that. Monica has served in various leadership roles in Toastmasters, including Club Growth Director, Program Quality Director, and District Director for District 50. Her extensive experience, knowledge, and passion for public speaking make her an invaluable addition to our panel today. Please join me in welcoming distinguished Toastmaster Monica Dirden to our panel. I'm delighted to introduce our next panelist, distinguished Toastmaster Sarfaraz Nazir. Sarfaraz has made a significant impact in the world of public speaking, and his achievements are a testament to his dedication and hard work. He is a 5 times distinguished Toastmaster and has been a 3-time world champion of public speaking semifinalist. Sarfaraz's impressive track record also includes 2 second-place wins at the World Championship of Public Speaking semifinals, as well as being a district humor speech contest finalist in both District 25 and District 50. His experience and expertise in public speaking and leadership make him an invaluable member of our panel today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Distinguished Toastmaster Sarfaraz Nazir. It is my pleasure to introduce our final panelist, Distinguished Toastmaster Jim Key. Jim has been a part of the Toastmaster community for an impressive 24 years, and his contest record speaks for itself. He was the District 50 Humorous Speech Champion in 2000 and the District 50 Evaluation Champion in 2022. However, what Jim is most renowned for in the Toastmaster world is his international speech contest record. He made history by being the first person to make it to the World Championship of Public Speaking finals in 3 consecutive years, and he is the only person to have finished in second place at the World Championships twice in a row. And in 2003, Jim achieved the ultimate goal and became the world champion of public speaking. Jim's experience, achievement, and knowledge in public speaking and contest preparation are truly remarkable. We are privileged to have him on our panel today, and I'm sure his insights will be invaluable to us all. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Distinguished Toastmaster Jim Key. Thank you all. First, would our panelists like to have an opening statement? Just come off mute, and if you would like to. I see Kellie shaking her head no.
That sounds like what they ask the international directors candidates, who always say, well, let's just go into the questions and I'll give my closing statement. That kind of thing.
I will be more than happy to do that. Let me switch screens real quick. There we go. Panelist, in your opinion, what are the most important qualities that a winning speech should possess?
Why don't you direct us for who you want to answer first? Because we're all going to sit here and be polite otherwise.
Okay, Jim, you're off mute, so how about you go first?
You said the most important quality of a winning speech?
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to give you one, I'll give you 2. Number 1, it has to be something that is of value to the audience. And I think it also needs to be something that is meaningful to you as the speaker. I think those are kind of parallel things, but you absolutely must be doing something valuable for the audience. And if you don't believe in it, if it's not meaningful to you, then you're going to have a much harder time getting over the hump and winning, if that's your goal.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to go next, and no one will steal my thunder like Jim just did. I have connection as well as heart. Like Jim said, you want to make sure that you're developing a speech that has a connection with your audience. It should be a universal message, because we all know we can all write messages and we think it's the best thing, thebomb.com. But if it doesn't have that universal connection, it won't go far. And I think I learned that the hard way. And it has to have a lot of heart. Bring a lot of heart to your message. And if you don't feel that message in the end, I think that it's time to rethink your message, not get rid of it completely, but just rethink it.
Absolutely. Sarfaraz, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I agree with Jim. that the speech should add value. It should be something that comes from your heart and reaches the hearts of the audience. And a winning speech is something that's based on your experience. It must tell your story, not something, hey, I read this book and it's a great book and let me tell you about it. No, it is what have you experienced and what have you learned from your experiences that might help others facing the same issues or problems.
Absolutely.
So it should be something that changes minds and wins hearts.
Yes, sir. Kellie?
I would think that vulnerability, it's a really difficult thing to be vulnerable in front of strangers. And in addition to heart and a clear message, you have to put yourself out there all the way. You can't go halfway. As Safaraz has said, if you're going to do it, go in with the mindset that you're going to win, that you've got to go all the way. And what's great is when you're giving this speech and moving through the levels, you'll get feedback, right? And so you can refine it and make it better. But I would say be yourself, be vulnerable, and like the other panelists, show a lot of heart and have a universal message.
Thank you, Kellie. Monica, you said that you learned that lesson the hard way. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I will, David. When I was going through the competing phase, there were several times when I had a message crafted that I thought was awesome. And I will say, when I took the opportunity to deliver it to several people, I then took the opportunity to deliver it to my kids. And I was like, so what do you guys think? Wasn't it funny? What did you get out of it? And they were like, yeah, we don't get that. So I had to go back to the drawing board and just listen to everyone's, I guess, their feedback, but know when to take the feedback. Because some feedback, not all feedback is good, right? So you have to realize what feedback to take. And that took me back to the lab. I say, my kids told me to stop saying the lab, but I say the lab when I had to go back and revamp the message several times. And then in the end, they were like, okay, yeah, mama, we get it now. We get it. We understand exactly what you were saying. So yes, it takes a lot of time to develop a message, and just revamping that message, going back over and recrafting that message so you do understand it's a universal topic. Not only delivering it to kids, but kids are honest, I will say. They will give you honest feedback no matter what. And get some people you trust as well as some you don't so much trust, right? And let them listen to your message and take that feedback and do what you will with it. But yes, it was a very hard lesson when I delivered it in front of my kids, and they got tired of it over time because I was like, you said it didn't make sense. So now I'm reworking on it. It was like, do we have to listen to this again? But saying it over and over, that redundancy really did help.
Just out of curiosity, how long did it take you to get your speech perfected? Like, and this will go for everyone. Is it a 6-month process? Is it a week process? Is it a 2-year process?
For me, it's a forever learning process, David. I would say that every time I listen to the speech that I gave and the speeches that I give, I would say at the international level, of course, you always thinking about what could you have done better or what didn't make sense. And you look at that speech and you're just like, yeah, that didn't jive. But yes, it takes a long time to develop a message. And to be honest, I spent about 9 months working on it, revamping it, delivering it to club after club, not just in our district, but other districts as well. I would say I am a true competitor, and anybody on the call who knows me knows that I am definitely a true competitor. I went to other districts. I searched out other districts. I listened to their winning speeches. And when I got to the world stage, it was just like, oh, I already know them because I went to their district conference and I already know the speech they were going to give. And I was like, no, I got this. But yeah, time will tell, and but yes, it takes a lot of time. And I would say working on it in the beginning took me like 9 months to develop a message, but again, you just never have it quite right until you figure that out in your mind. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Absolutely. Jim, how about you?
I've had a lot of people ask me how many versions of my speeches, how many hours I put in, and most of the time I don't really believe they want to know because it will probably scare them. I would say, very obsessed with the process and the luxury of being in the contest series, especially for international speech, 3 years in a row, is that I could rework some of those ideas and put in more time and more iterations of editing on them. So I can't really say a specific number of versions of my speech that I had or a specific number of hours, but I know that it was in the hundreds for both hours and versions. And I started well in advance, as Monica indicated. You know, sometimes these ideas may pop into your mind, but a lot of times for me, it took a long time, a long process of cultivating that and honing it to get to the point where I thought it was ready. Now, your question was, when is a speech perfected? I don't know how to answer that because I'm not sure there is such a thing as a perfect speech. In fact, in 2002, in the lead up to the World Championships, I was fortunate to get some on-site coaching with some of the previous world champions, and I was making adjustments to my speech even the day or two before. Not major things, but just little tiny delivery things or a word here or a word there. And if you are somebody who really needs to have that ingrained in your memory, I don't necessarily recommend that, but I had enough experience where I could work those things in and limit those changes. At some point, you have to lock it down and commit it to memory so that you can deliver an authentic version that doesn't leave out large chunks that you will then question later. But it's a long process, many iterations for me, and definitely a growth journey.
Absolutely. Sarfaraz?
Yes, when someone asks me how long it takes to prepare a winning speech, my answer is a lifetime. Because as Jim mentioned, there is no such speech as perfect. I can prepare a speech this year that I think, hey, it's perfect. And next year, if I look at it, I'll say, no, that's not perfect. I would like to improve. To give you an example, in 1995, I used a speech with the title Keys to Success. To open the speech, I wanted some story that ends with humor. So instead of coming with my own words, I did research and found a story. The problem was it was a very popular story. Most of the members in the audience had heard about it. My speech had 3 points. For 2 of them, I used a personal story. For one, I used a story borrowed from somewhere else. And again, it turned out to be a story that many people had heard about it. So that was not the way to prepare a speech that you would term a winning speech. So it took me 5 years to look at that speech again, and I changed Keys to Success to Drive Your Dreams. Again, this speech had 3 points, but all 3 points had my personal stories to illustrate what I was talking about. And then for the humor, instead of having a long story borrowed from somewhere else, I used what was current at that time. At that time, I was giving the speech. The show Deal or No Deal was very popular. So I opened with the question, have you seen NBC's Deal or No Deal? And I raised my hand and paused to let the audience respond to it. Most of the hands went up with a few exceptions. And then I went on to say, then you know, it's a show that requires absolutely no brains. And the audience burst out with laughter. And that's the opening was short and sweet. And those were my own words using the current event or a current popular TV show. So I've learned by making mistakes or through self-evaluation, saying what worked, what did not work. So again, that speech, Drive Your Dreams, I don't use that speech anymore, but I've used portions of it now in my keynotes, whichever portion of the speech works well with the keynote that I'm preparing. So again, there is no such thing as a perfect speech. It's a work in progress all the time.
Kellie, I know one of your championships was in table topics. Those are a whole lot harder to prepare ahead of time. Do you have any suggestions on ways to help prepare for table topics?
No one was more shocked than I was. How when you're doing table topics, the first thing you really need is listen to the question carefully. Because sometimes we believe we hear something that somebody didn't say. We want to read into it. So you have to listen very, very carefully to the question. And I am a fortunate person. I have a family that can be a little, harsh. So I always have these one-liners, these comebacks, those kind of things. I have honed that skill. And I would always try and work humor into my table topics response. And the great thing about table topics is if you really don't like the question, you can pivot and turn it into something else. And I think the first question I ever answered on this stage was, would you rather be a rock star or a scientist? And every other contestant picked scientist and I picked rock star. And apparently, because I was different and honest about it, somehow I managed to win that contest. I don't think I'm very good at table topics. That's why I said I was really shocked. But listen carefully, answer the question truthfully and with some humor and heart. And we talk about that heart. It takes you a long way. Be yourself. Be who you are. The audience can sense authenticity. And that's what they're looking for. So I say go for it. Whatever contest it is, just go for it. You never know.
I just got a message from Monica. Her internet has dropped, so we're going to continue, and hopefully she'll be able to connect back in with us shortly. Let's go to another question. How do you choose the topic for your speech, and what factors do you consider when making that decision? Safaraz?
The past few years, instead of picking a topic and then saying, what can I talk about it? I look at some of my life experiences, pick stories from my life, and then see what did I learn from this experience? What is the message in this story? And then I prepare a speech around it. So if my story is not too long, then I may end up having 3 different stories put together that have a common theme. Or if it's a long story, then I base my speech on that one long story. So my view is that whatever I talk about, it must have some appeal or some value for the audience. It's my experience, but here's what you can do with it instead of just talking about it. Last few months, I've been judging several speech contests and realized even though the information is available, what makes a winning speech, experienced people like Jim Key and other world champions usually go around to district conferences to talk about how they prepare the speech, yet people fail to understand how to go about picking a topic or preparing a speech around it. A lot of them talk about, Toastmasters. You don't want to talk about the benefits of Toastmasters to the audience that's made up of Toastmasters. Recently, in one of the speech contests, the person talked about human resources departments should hire disabled people. It's a nice topic, but it's not a topic that is going to appeal to a wide audience. So for me, is to look in my life, and I've lived a good life. So there's a lot of experiences that have happened to me outside United States and within United States that I can take that and make it into a speech. So that's how I prepare my speeches, to start with something from my life and then see how I can put it together as a speech that makes sense to the audience.
And that ties back in very well with all of your answers in to the first question: what qualities make a good speech? If you're not connecting with your topic, nobody else will either. Jim, do you have anything to add?
Yes, in terms of choosing your topic, in the early stages of the 2002 contest season, I had a conversation with Mark Brown, who's the 1995 world champion. I had already won the district humorist championship. I'd been to the world championship and won second place in 2001 already. But I wanted to go back to the drawing board. And I asked Mark, how do you go about selecting a speech topic? And his answer changed how I look at developing the topic, but also where I look to go with the topics. He knew that my children were very, very important to me. And he said, okay, think about your children. He said, if the last step you take leaving that stage is the last step you take in life, what is that one last message you would want to leave for your children? And that cuts through a lot of the fluff and any other peripheral thing to get down to helping decide, what is that really, really important message? Now, adapt that for yourselves. If you don't have children in your life, or if your children are grown, think about the person who is so paramount of importance to you. And if your speech was the last message you could leave for them, what would it be? That will help significantly. Now, when it comes to specifically going through my experiences and my memories and finding stories that I can apply to that, there are 4 main questions that I used as filters for that. And I think I've got them in a document somewhere. I'll see if I can find them after I answer and post this in the chat. But the questions were, what do you know? What are your areas of expertise? What have you done, your experiences? What have you learned? Obviously, we want to learn something from listening to your speech. And then what do you love? What are your passions? And those 4 questions helped me filter out a lot of the things that were possibly good stories, but maybe not ones I really wanted to build a speech around, and help drive me towards selecting my topics ultimately. But those are the things that I would say, and I'll see if I can find that and put it in the chat.
That would be amazing. And what a brilliant idea on using your kids as, if this was the last message. I can tell you that I've given a lot of speeches that I would not want those to be the last messages that my kiddo heard from me. And that's a great way of looking at it, though.
Well, I wouldn't say then every single speech has to be that, but when you're preparing, especially for a contest, that's something to keep in mind. And as far as using kids for your either stories or your motivations, I'll say this: I always believe use get value from the things that cost you. So there you go. And kids do.
Kellie, do you have anything you would like to add?
I would say follow your passion, because passion comes across when you're giving a speech. Something, I'll allude back to Jim, but something that you are extremely passionate about, and you want to share that message with others. My speeches, I love humorists. I love doing humor. I love listening to people laugh. And the more I make you laugh, the more I want you to laugh. And I go way out of my way to hear that laughter. But I talk about things that have occurred in my life. And I've had an interesting life, and some very odd, strange, and unusual things have occurred. And I think they have for most people. And you can use that to tell a story, because some of this stuff you just can't make up. It has to be true because it's so unusual. But whatever you're passionate about, I think you can work with that to create an award-winning speech because the audience wants to feel that. They want to go on a trip with you, right? They want to follow your stories and go on that ride with you. And we've all had things in our lives that maybe we're extremely proud of, maybe not so proud of, but other people can relate to it. So follow your passion and throw your heart in there and do your very best.
Thank you, Kellie. Monica, can you kind of tell us how you go about picking your speech topic?
And I would co-sign what everyone else said. Kellie talked about following your passion, those things that are most important to you. Jim Tech said, what do you know? What have you done? What have you learned? And what do you love? Those are definitely 4 important questions that you should ask yourself each and every time. And what factors go into that? A universal message, number 1. I know in one of the speeches, I talked about how my son waited all year to ride a roller coaster at Disneyland. And I ended the speech about how broke I was, but to see that smile on his face made it all worthwhile. And in that speech, I talked about how I lost my job and how I had to go back to the drawing board. But I started off with my kids because I know that they always add value to that. And like Kellie said, you can't make this stuff up when it comes to kids. So many things happen, and that's just in life general. Passion, follow your heart. Your speech has to have heart in it because you have to believe it first and foremost. And if that speech doesn't bring you value when you're thinking about it, again, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Monica. How do each of you manage nerves and anxiety when giving a contest speech, or really any speech? What techniques have you found to be helpful, if you don't mind sharing those with us?
For me, it's Vaseline. MJ will definitely. I love Vaseline because Vaseline helps when it comes to the teeth and making the mouth sit together. I will say I always take the opportunity to learn the room, and I do that now even at work. I make sure I go in before. Preparation is everything. I'll go in before I even have to speak about anything and make sure the room is right. Try to get to know people, talk to people within the room just to make sure that I'm comfortable. But I think everybody has nerves and anxiety when you're first speaking, and it's hard to get that out. So that's why I truly make it a point to make sure I know the room, at least a few people, talk to people so you can get some of those bugs out.
Okay, just real quick, explain the Vaseline thing. I saw you put it here, but explain that one for me because I don't understand.
I was on the call before, and LaShonda Phelps, she's on this call too. And she talked about it's all for pageantry, right? So you put it on your teeth and it helps your bottom lip, your top lip and your lips not stick together when you're talking. I know I had that experience at work the other day because I was talking to one of the VPs and I was like, oh my goodness, it was a last minute meeting. I wasn't prepared. And I'm like, dang it, I should have put some Vaseline on right beforehand. And it was just an impromptu meeting and I was so not ready. And I'm glad I had my water in hand. So yes, the Vaseline definitely helps. And they sell the little minis now that you can carry at all times, but keep Vaseline. It definitely helps keep that nervousness. Because I know for me, when I'm nervous, my lips seem to stick together, or I don't know, it does something wonky. Maybe I'm the only one. You don't have to co-sign on it. Thank you, Kimberly Richards. But it does stick together when you're nervous. So Vaseline definitely helps with that.
Okay, thank you.
Try it.
Definitely. Jim, do you have any suggestions?
Well, for dealing with nervousness, there's a couple things that I recommend. One of them I know is not going to be popular, but sometimes what's beneficial is not necessarily popular. The first thing I recommend to people is, regardless of wherever you are at the moment, fitness wise, improve your physical fitness some, because there's physical symptoms that come along with nervousness. And if your body is in just a little bit better condition, you're that much more empowered and enabled to deal with those physical symptoms. So you don't have to be an Olympic athlete, but wherever you are, improve your fitness some, you'll be able to deal with the symptoms a little bit later. Secondly, prep. Adequately prepare. Practice if you can, videotape yourself, because the more you prep, the more you're familiar with your message and your topic and your stories, the less that element's going to be back in the back of your head going, you don't really know what you're going to say. You don't know this. The more you're prepared, the better you can head off some of those concerns at the pass. And then I think the biggest thing, though, is nervousness is a mental thing. It's a mental thing, and that's the battleground that we have to deal with it on. So how do you think about your presentations? How do you think about your speech? At the risk of getting out a little too far over my skis, I will say this. Well, no, let me ask it like this. How many of you have ever given a gift to somebody that you've either put a lot of money into or you've put a lot of yourself into? You've made something, you've put time and energy into it, and you know it's going to be something that that person will benefit from or love? Yeah, a lot of us. In those moments before you give that gift to them and you're waiting for them to open it, what do you feel? You may feel sweaty palms, your heart rate may increase. You may have some of those manifestations of nervousness, the same physical manifestations that I was alluding to earlier. I look at my speeches as my gift to the audience. I'm investing my time. I'm investing my stories. I'm being vulnerable in a lot of situations. I'm trying to do something good for them. And I know if I have that kind of focus, it's going to benefit them. So when I'm being introduced, even if I start to feel those butterflies or the heartbeat, I remind myself, I'm about to give them this gift that I've prepared for them. Now, I don't want to take that too far and say, my speeches are a gift to mankind. I don't take it that far. But just knowing that your purpose is to do something valuable for the audience and kind of reprogramming your thought process can help you deal with that. And then you can just use that energy that comes from those symptoms to enliven your delivery.
Thanks, Jim. Kellie, do you have anything that you do to help deal with nerves?
I do. And this is going to sound like the craziest thing ever. But I always get very nervous before I'm going to compete. I don't get nervous at my home group. I know everyone there. I'm comfortable. But when you're in a room full of people you don't know, and this means a lot to you, you get very nervous. I get the butterflies. I have to go to the bathroom 27 times back and forth to work off that nervous energy. But what I do is when my name or they ask me to come on stage, I take a very deep breath in and out. And that is because the time doesn't start until I speak or have a deliberate gesture. So I take those seconds to take that deep breath. And then I tell myself, I'm going to crush this and I'm going to win. I convince myself that I'm going to give it everything I have. And this is going to be the best speech of my life. And I'm going to win. And then I give my speech. I kind of amp myself up for it. And I think we have to do that for ourselves because you're not really listening to the people around you. You're nervous and they're saying, you're going to do great. It'll be great. Don't worry. Well, of course you're worried, or at least I'm worried. And so I give myself a pep talk and tell myself, you're just going to crush this. Just go and just crush it. And then I just go.
I like that. Safraz, do you have anything you would like to add?
Yes. A lot of times people say, how do I get rid of nervousness? You want to control your nervousness, not get rid of it. Getting nervous before you speak means your body, your system is getting ready because it's similar to fight or flight syndrome. I remember one time I was about to give my speech and I realized I was not nervous at all. And that made me nervous, that I was not nervous. So sometimes we are conscious how we look, our appearance. So before speaking, a few minutes before speaking, I go somewhere by myself loosen up like you see the track and field athletes doing just before the race at the starting line. They're, shaking their hands and moving their legs, not heavy duty exercises, but just light movements. So your body is relaxed. Go to the restroom, making sure that tie is straight, like check your teeth, that you don't have spinach in between your teeth. And for men, making sure that, the fly is zipped up. Because I've seen people where a person stood and gave a speech, and all along people were looking at, hey, his zipper is down, and people are trying to say who should be the one to tell him. So make sure you take care of things that you're concerned about. And when it comes to actually giving the speech, I want to get lost in my speech. Like many people, there's been times when I traveled or drove from point A to point B. And when I arrived at point B, I did not even remember that I was driving. And that's how I want to give my speech, that I'm lost. I'm not concerned about how I'm looking. Is my hair all messed up? Ties? No, because I'm delivering a message that has some importance to the audience. So best way is just loosen up a little bit, focus on the audience, and do your best. And the worst thing is something could always go wrong. And if it does that, or that happens, just tell yourself, the sun will rise again. 5 words. Nothing, the world will not fall apart.
Thank
Life
you.
will go on.
And as our past district director said at many contests I attended, nobody's has ever died in a speech contest because it went poorly. It will be okay. Jim, I think you had something else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I did want to add one other thing, but before I do, I will just agree with what Safra said for the gentleman checking your fly. It can be embarrassing. I didn't have it happen to me in a contest, but I had it happen to me in a club meeting, and it became the topic of my humorous speech championship in 2000. So if it happens, use it later if you can, but best to not make it happen. One thing I wanted to dispel, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, one way to get rid of nervousness is just imagine the audience in their underwear. No, do not do that. I guarantee you, if I went into a room to speak and people were all in their underwear, it would not diminish my nervousness. So that's the last little bit I'll add on that.
Thank you, Jim.
But I was going to add, don't use lemon. Sometimes I read that, hey, to make sure your mouth doesn't close while you're speaking, use lemon. So I did that, rub lemon on my lips. And then all during my speech, I kept on feeling the fuzz. So I had to keep doing this thing. So no lemon. And I had not heard about the Vaseline.
Thank you. Well, we've got about 15 minutes left. I would like to open it up to the audience to ask some questions if that's acceptable.
Allison put a question in the chat. I answered her in the chat. She was asking, what is first, title or the speech? I answered speech, and then I come up with a title. And what I didn't say was the title changes many times until I feel it represents what I'm talking about.
Jim, same for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Safraz and Monica?
I would definitely say the same.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes while I'm preparing the speech, the title may come to me, but my final title comes after this entire speech is ready. And then based on the speech, say what title fits, that it does not give away my speech, but it entices the audience that they want to listen to it. So I agree, final title should be at the end of the speech or after you have completed your speech.
Okay. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
If I may, Dave,
Yes, sir.
what about dress? How do you dress for a contest or a speech in general?
I say let's start it out with the international speech contest. How would you dress for that if it's different than the other contests? Jim?
Well, I would say dress in a manner that demonstrates that you respect your audience, number one, but also if there can be some way that your attire can project your expertise, your gravitas. Now, the big differentiating factor is whether or not part of your attire is related to your speech in a manner of maybe like a prop. The example I'll give, in 1990, the gentleman who won the world championship won it wearing a tuxedo jacket, blue jeans, and boots. I wouldn't recommend that unless it was associated with, unless it had a meaning to your speech. But otherwise, I would say dress in a way that shows that you respect your audience and that establishes your gravitas or expertise. Now, in the humorous speech, that can go a lot of different areas, because you may want to wear something that's funny that has to do with your speech and still is a prop or a costume, if you will. But those are the things that I kind of think about. I always wore a suit and tie when I competed, because that's just what I felt, how I felt I wanted to project my presence.
Monica, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say, you guys know I'm all about professionalism. And when it comes to ladies in heels, just be very careful with that, because you want to make sure that you're wearing shoes that you can actually move around the stage with. And heels are sometimes clunky and you hear them every time you move. But if you want the message to get out to your audience, make sure that you have on a good pair of shoes. And that's for men as well, right? You don't want shoes that are too little, because I think men's shoes, my husband, sometimes they have that heel on the end that makes that little clunking sound too.
Absolutely.
David, I'd like to know of any recommendations of really asking questions to the audience and expecting a response of some sort.
A good friend told me, just be ready for anything when you ask a question.
Yeah, you be number one, keep it short. Don't let the audience run away with your time. Give them an indication how you want them to react. If it's a raised hand, raise your hand or ask for a raised hand. But know that you might get a lot of response. You might get no response. You have to be prepared with how you're going to step forward either way. And I'll give you a quick example. In one of my keynote addresses, I play the bass guitar, and I've asked people, how many of you play the bass guitar? Usually there's not more than 2 or 3 in a crowd of 100 to 200 people or so. Sometimes there's none. If 1 or 2 raise their hands, I will acknowledge it, say, great, then you can agree with me on this. If nobody responds, I'll say, fantastic, that makes me the expert, and go from there. But just know, you have to know, you might get a lot of response, you might get a little bit, you might get none. Be prepared either way, and keep control of your time. Do not let the audience take your time and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
Safaraz?
Yeah, I agree. If it's a speech contest, international speech contest, the questions could be, can you imagine, or how would you feel? But I do not want response from the audience, because in a 7-minute speech, if somebody starts talking, that's a distraction. But if I'm giving a keynote, for example, in which case I'll ask the question, most of the time is, I want people to raise their hands. And if I say, well, I had a choice between going to Istanbul, Turkey, or Paris, France, how many you think I went to Turkey? And then I have to pause and wait for the response, and then say, how many of you think that I went to Paris, France? And again, pause. But if it's a training session, then I'll ask questions and I'll have few of the attendees do response. It's an interactive session, but not in a speech contest. Usually it's a rhetorical question, and you assume people will answer in their mind, because you don't want actually people saying. Now, and sometimes you may have some of them repeat your message or repeat the title of your speech within your speech, that's fine. But I cannot be asking questions and have someone give me a 30 seconds response during my speech.
Kellie, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the other panelists answered it. If you're asking a question and Safaraz did it, you raise your hand. How many of you have ever, ran around the block? And you raise your hand because you want them to raise their hand. The audience will usually mimic what you're doing. But yes, you don't want people shouting out answers because time is precious. And 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes goes by like that. And so you really do need to ask the question, raise your hand, and move on to your story if that's at all possible.
We've got another question from the chat. What do you suggest, or how do you suggest a beginner Toastmaster add vocal variety, hand gestures, and movements into their speeches? Kellie. Or Monica.
Go, Monica. Go, Monica.
For a beginner, I would recommend writing your speech out from word by word and working on that vocal variety and where you're going to move and putting that into the speech. That way you can also work on the timing. As Kellie and the panelists stated, you have an opportunity to work on the timing as well. So write your message out. Again, this gives you an opportunity to have different versions of your message as well, but write it out word by word. And at the end of the day, it's probably not going to look like that. You don't want to go word for word, but it helps you with the memorization, helps you focus on where you want your vocal variety. You can put a little tab on there saying, hey, that may take an extra time. Think about how many words you speak a minute. That's going to help with that as well. Write out your message. That will definitely help you in the end. Definitely for a beginner.
So we used to talk a lot years ago in Toastmasters about stage blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to talk a lot that a speech should have no more than 3 points. So as you're working through your points, you start on the right, talk about the first one, move to the middle, talk about the second, move to the left, talk about the third, and then come back to the center for the conclusion. It's an easy way to start to move on this stage. Depending on this speech, I mean, I've been all over this stage. I've jumped shoes off the stage. I've done all kinds of crazy things. But when you're starting out and you want to move with your points. It's an easy way to remember, oh, now I need to be in the center. I need to be in the left. And then realize, depending on your stage size, your gestures, like we're in this little box, so your gestures kind of have to stay here. But the larger the stage, the larger your gestures, because you've got to take up this stage. So depending on the size of your stage is how large your gestures get. Those are my couple of things that I was taught early on.
Jim?
I would just add what Monica said about writing your speech out. Do that, but do it in one column, have a second column, and make notes to yourself of physical movements that you want to do. Then practice doing those things, holding that so you know to do it. Do that a couple times and practice it without that, and record yourself and watch the videos to make sure that your gestures are natural, that they're present, and that they're coming across as you imagine them in your mind. But make sure that you do those things purposefully. And also, when you practice while walking, because you'll become more accustomed to natural movement while you speak, and then you can then integrate that into your speeches when you practice in a speaking area that is more along the size of the one you'll actually deliver the speech in.
Okay.
I have a question about the stage movement. Kellie mentioned in the on-site, you move 3 points, but how about the online contest? Since we only have a box, do we still move to the side of the screen or stay in the middle of the screen? That's the question I've been thinking for a while. Hey, David.
Well, I will jump in there and say, do what is natural for your audience to see. There may be some ways that you can use that space. Just for me personally, I'm not comfortable standing still, standing rigid. And so I would naturally have some kind of movements, but I want to practice that, especially because I want to know where the limitations of the camera's, viewfinder is. So I would practice that. If there are ways you can do that by, moving forward or moving back. The first online contest we had in 2020, the world champion did some very creative things with coming close to the camera, backing up, going to the side. And so if there are ways that you can work that in that are natural to your presentation style and your persona, I would say take advantage of that. Why leave a tool in the toolbox when you could use it effectively if you do it purposefully?
Yeah, my car. Yeah, I watched that.
Yes.
It's a great, yeah.
Yeah.
And June, you can also practice, right? If you have Zoom, you can practice your area and then tape it on the floor with, bright blue painter's tape. So the edges of where you are. That helps too while you're practicing. And I'm with Jim. On Zoom, you can move back, but you can get really close to people and talk to them.
Yeah.
And it does. It's a little different. And people are like, wow, I didn't realize you could get that close, and looking right at them. So you do have some options when you're using Zoom or when you're on camera.
Thank you. Thanks all this advice. Yeah.
Chris had a question in the chat. Should I memorize my speech? If I should, how do I do this? Safraz?
No, I don't think memorizing is good, because there's always a possibility that you might forget about it. A long time ago, actually, I was in high school at the time. I went to represent my school in a speech contest. And when I was preparing for the speech, I was doing research and going through one of the books, I found a sentence that was very sophisticated. I thought, oh, this would be cool. And I memorized it. And I did not have the speech with me. So while I was delivering the speech, when I came to that point where I was supposed to say the sentence, my mind went blank. It was just a nanosecond, but enough see where people could see. And I had my head down because I was trying to think what the sentence is. And I learned from that mistake, never memorize. So best way I now prepare my speeches is to make an outline. Then I prepare my speech from working from the outline. Once I have my speech, then in order to deliver, I convert back to an outline and I practice using that outline. And I practice most of the time while I'm driving, so it doesn't take extra time. And if I cannot remember something the way I wrote it down, then I change it to the way I'm saying it rather than forcing myself to memorize the way it's written. So that's my technique, and that's worked for me.
We're almost out of time. So do any of our other panelists have any?
Yeah, I'd like to address that. And I'm going to diverge from what Safra said a little bit. And this is an art. It's not a science. So take what works for you. I do believe in memorizing your speech, but I don't believe in having to recite it verbatim from memory. More important than memorizing the exact words, I think, are internalizing the message, so that if you realize you've missed a word or you've missed a sentence, that's not going to throw you off track too bad. You can basically grab that back and say, okay, now where was I? And then go from there. So for me, especially with larger audiences and when time is so precious, I did memorize it, but I wanted to deliver it as a living, breathing conversation in that moment. And that's how you have to prepare to do.
We are about out of time, but I would like to ask Manny, do you have anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here tonight. I see we had 1.43. Very good session. I learned a lot about memorizing speeches because that's kind of my weak spot. But I learned some techniques on how to do that better. I'm certain that everyone here will take away something that they learned new to practice in the future to make us better speakers. With that, I would just want to say thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, coordinator. Thank you, the learning leadership team. Thanks, everyone, District 50, for being here tonight. Thanks once again.
Let's give our panelists one more big round of applause. We really do appreciate you being here, giving up your time to spend with us. And I did put the link for the feedback in the chat. If everyone would please take a moment and fill out that feedback for us. That way we know what we're doing well, what we need to improve on, and make these sessions even better.
Thank you, David. You did a wonderful job.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
Yes. Thank you. Y'all have a great one.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for attending.
Excellent.
Good to see
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
This was excellent,
Bye-bye.
excellent.
And thank
Write
you.
your speeches.
And compete.
Let's
Yeah.
Yes,
compete.
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 And always remember, people will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
That's
By Maya
true.
Angelou
Right.
herself.
Beautiful.
That's true.
Right. That is so true. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Manny,
panelists.
I was trying to say that before you said yours because I never want to interrupt our senior three. So you and Kelly have to say something before we get off the call.
What?
See, Kelly already said something, so now you have to say something.
Great. I love the Vaseline tip.
Yes,
People-
yes, I
people-
like that.
How
I'm telling
important
you.
Vaseline really is.
It works. Oh my God, Vaseline
It works on
It's-
everything.
Yes, everything. I'm telling
Everything.
you, it's amazing.
You've got a problem, Vaseline.
That's the answer. That's.
What else it works for when you're dying